Sometimes motivation doesn't just disappear. It feels like it drains out of you slowly, and you're left staring at the same goals with none of the energy that you had before. If you watched my last video, I spoke about survival mode, about how your system can shut things down when it feels unsafe. I want to go a little deeper now, not to analyze you, but just to gently understand what's happening underneath. So a trigger warning for this video is that it'll be discussing eating disorder recovery, low motivation, and mental health challenges. I think one of the most confusing parts of recovery is that you can care deeply about getting better and still feel nothing when it comes to action. And that's not a character flaw, but when an eating disorder or a mental health illness has been part of your life for a long time, it doesn't just sit in your thoughts, it wires itself into your brain's reward systems. Certain behaviors can start to signal safety, control, even relief. Your brain releases chemicals that makes those patterns feel stabilizing, even when they're harming you. So when you begin recovery, you're not just stopping habits. You're asking your brain to relearn what safety feels like, and that takes time. There's often a lag, a biological lag. Healthy behaviors, eating regularly, going to therapy, resting, don't immediately light up the reward centers in the same way. Sometimes they feel flat, or uncomfortable, or even threatening. I think that gap can be deeply disheartening because you think, if I really wanted this, wouldn't I feel more driven? But rewiring doesn't feel inspiring. It feels repetitive, and sometimes boring, and sometimes emotionally raw. There's also exhaustion. Recovery is work, not dramatic, cinematic work, but daily, quiet effort. Challenging rules, sitting with anxiety, letting go of certainty. Eating when you don't feel hungry, stopping when you want to push. And if you've been living in survival mode for months or years, your system is exhausted. Decision fatigue is real. When every choice feels loaded, your brain starts conserving energy. And one of the first things to go is motivation. I don't think that it's weakness, I think it's depletion. And then there's ambivalence, the part that people don't always talk about openly, that disordered behaviors often carried meaning. Maybe they gave you control, maybe they numbed something unbearable, maybe they became part of how you understood yourself. Recovery can feel like giving up something that once protected you. Of course, part of you hesitates. That hesitation can look like lack of motivation, but sometimes it's grief or fear or just a nervous system that hasn't learned a new way to feel safe yet. Perfectionism can quietly make all of this worse. If you expect recovery to look clean and linear, every wobble feels like failure. And when failure feels intolerable, it's easier to shut down entirely. I've noticed that when the voice inside shifts from do this perfectly to what's the point, motivation collapses. Not because you don't care, but because caring feels dangerous if you might fail. Practical life factors matter too. Recovery doesn't happen in a vacuum. It competes with work, responsibilities, finances, family dynamics. If your environment still cues old behaviors, certain routines, certain spaces, certain conversations, the friction is higher. And motivation doesn't thrive in high friction. It thrives where the path is slightly smoother. So what helps? Not forcing yourself to feel motivated. I think it's more about creating conditions that allow motivation to return quietly. Lowering the pressure is one of the biggest shifts. Instead of asking, how do I fix everything? Maybe the question becomes, what is small enough that I won't panic? Sometimes it's as simple as deciding breakfast the night before so you don't negotiate with yourself in the morning, or placing something on the counter so it's visible, or telling one safe person, I'm trying to be consistent with lunch. Can you check in? These aren't dramatic acts, but they reduce friction. And when friction lowers, willingness has space to grow. Routines can help in a similar way, not strict punishing routines, but gentle anchors, a regular time for meals, a short evening wind down, a rule like I don't make food decisions after 8 p.m. Small structures that hold you when your feelings fluctuate. When something becomes predictable, it requires less motivation to begin. Values matter too. I think there's a difference between I have to recover and I want a life that feels bigger than this illness. When motivation feels thin, reconnecting to what you care about, freedom, relationships, creativity, stability, can shift the energy slightly. Not into excitement, but into meaning. Meaning is steadier than motivation. Rest is part of this, even if it feels counterintuitive. Exhaustion kills drive. Sleep, small breaks, and speaking to yourself without cruelty aren't luxuries, they're fuel. If you treat rest like something that you have to earn after perfect recovery behavior, you stay depleted. If you treat it as maintenance, motivation has a chance to rebuild. And maybe most importantly, notice the tiny shifts. Motivation rarely returns as a rush of confidence. It shows up as resisting a little less, asking for help once, staying at the table slightly longer, completing something small and thinking, okay, I did that. Those moments matter more than they feel like they do. Recovery isn't about waiting until you feel inspired. It's about building small, steady conditions where inspiration doesn't have to carry everything. If motivation has faded, it doesn't mean you've failed. It might mean your system needs gentler scaffolding, less pressure, more safety. And sometimes the quiet willingness to try just one small thing, even without enthusiasm, is already the beginning of it returning. What would it look like to reduce friction just a little bit this week? Not overhaul your life, but just to soften one edge. Thank you for watching my video. I hope it was helpful.